This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. As I continue my run through films based on real life serial killers, and we come to yet another one by one of the worst directors, in my opinion, Uwe Lamel. But thankfully, this is the last one that I own of his because, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of his films are out of print. I know I wanted to get Son of Sam, Killer Picton. They were out of print. I was going to pick up his Black Dahlia film. He has, I think, 2 Zodiac films, one of the DC Sniper. But for now, this is the last one I have, and it's his 2005 film, which, unfortunately, there hasn't really been a good movie about this killer. There's a ton of good documentaries. There's actually more films about the search for him, because he was another one like BTK that eluded capture for almost 20 years. And I would say, for lack of a better term, he is another top 10 serial killer for me, as far as, a fascinating story, loving to read about him or watch documentaries on him. I'd probably say he's my 6th or 7th favorite. And like most of his films, the title is the moniker of the killer. It is 2005's The Green River Killer. Of course, based on Gary Ridgway. I guess I unintentionally saved the best for last, because even though this is still a terrible movie, it still is, it's awful, it's miles and away still better than his BTK film, even that much better than his Night Stalker film, and then even that much better than his Diary of a Cannibal. So, all 3 of those are among the worst films I've ever seen. This, I would say, is slightly better, both just as a film. I mean, it's still the direct-to-video, poorly acted crap that he does. But I guess I would say this one was easier to watch. And also, I would say this one has a bit more accuracy. I actually felt like somewhat I was watching a Gary Ridgway film, whereas with those, I really didn't feel like I was watching a Rich Ramirez or a Dennis Rader film. But the one thing this does do that's kind of weird / beneficial, which sometimes it's always cool, but it can be a detriment, is the voiceover is both from the actor George Kiseleff, who plays Gary Ridgway. Voiceover is both from him and actual authentic confession audio from Ridgway himself. And we also cut to June 13th, 2003 video footage of his confession from time to time. Now, normally when a movie does that, even a well-made film, like say Extremely Wicked, that'll have portions of real footage, especially towards the end credits, or the Michael Riley Burke Ted Bundy film, which I do enjoy. Even if it's something I like, if there's actual footage involved, it kind of just makes me want to watch a documentary. It kind of makes me think, I really do want to watch a documentary right now. But where this film was so bad, I kind of had to give credit to it. I'm like, oh, thank God. There's actually something here. There's no way they can fuck these facts up because it's the real thing. But, oddly enough, I read somewhere that Uwe Lamel read some about Ridgway, but then when it came to writing the film, he said he forgot almost everything he read. Which, if that's the case, why would you continue to make the film? Why would you still be committed to that project? Obviously, you're not interested. But even a film where he comes out and says, yeah, I kind of forgot everything I read. It's still more accurate than his Night Stalker or BTK films, so weirdly enough. Now, uh, before I get too far, works I have on Ridgway is, of course, I've held these up numerous times, numerous documentaries, about 2 dozen encyclopedic books on serial killers. The only work I have on him specifically, and there are a bunch, but the only one I have is Ann Rule's book, Green River Running Red, which I think is one of the bigger books about him specifically. Which, just to. Actually, I'll save that. But, there's also the book, The Riverman by Robert Keppel, which there's been numerous movies, like The Riverman, about when Ted Bundy was approached to give his insight in how to catch him. There's also Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer movie. I would like to get that book. There was one written by his second wife, I think it was, about her life with Gary Ridgway. I would love to get that. And then just numerous books about like the hunt for the Green River Killer and stuff like that. But I've seen numerous other documentaries like Born to Kill or Most Evil. I have not yet caught Sins of the Father, which is supposed to be a really good one, so I'll check that out. But Ridgway is still a top 10 of mine, and he's not so much like the pillar of the community, family man that, say, BTK or Gacy was, but maybe to a much lesser extent. But he was able to elude capture for about 20 years, and he's amassed one of the biggest body counts in American history, which for someone that stays in one area and dumps most of the bodies in the same area to elude capture for that long, it's pretty astounding. So, well, so as far as the film goes, this is one of the films that Marion Dora actually served as the second unit director. Of course, him and Lamel had a working relationship from '96 up until, I think, Cannibal, which Marion Dora did. That was his first film, which was supposed to be a Lamel film, but he thought it was too graphic, so Dora did it. And Dora also worked on the BTK film, which, looking back, I see it. Also, Killer Picton, DC Sniper. This one is the most obvious. I mean, a lot of the cinematography, the way a lot of the scenes are shot and composed, the fact that Karsten Frank has a supporting role in this. He was the lead in Cannibal and Angel's Melancholy. He's in this as Boris, the imaginary friend, which is one of the biggest creative liberties of Lamel. None of that is true. So especially the scenes with him, the way those scenes are shot, it looks and feels just like a Marion Dora film. Crazy close-ups, maybe like the quarter of a face, usually doing something kind of disturbing. He always pops up whenever Gary's killing somebody. He appears in like the background, even in one scene where he's like in the next room of the RV, relieving himself as Gary kills a prostitute. It's all these weird angles, like the back of his head or like upward is it feels like a Mary Dora scene. But other than that, I think it's pretty much the same crew that's been on a bunch of his films, like produced by Nola Roper, edited by Christian Bem. I know that I saw some of the names that, edited by X Jin. Well, this is Christian Bem, but music by Robert J. Walsh. Okay, that was a bit different. But even some of the supporting cast, like his attorney at the end was Uncle Mike in Night Stalker. The woman that runs the bar where all the prostitutes are, she was the aunt in Night Stalker. there's a few recurring people from throughout Lamel's films. It's only 83 minutes, came out in 85. Uh, I actually did not read any of this. Oh, the apparently the house that Ridgway lives in this film was also in his Black Dahlia film. Okay. But anyway, so real quick, just about Gary Ridgway. He was born February 18th of 49, ultimately convicted of 48 murders, mostly prostitutes and runaways. Uh, but then in 2011, a 49th was added. Uh, Mostly between the ages of 14 and early 30s. Uh, Mostly around the Seattle and Tacoma, Washington area. Most of the bodies dumped near the Green River. Though it believed confirmed murders to be between 1982 1998, though they think he might have continued till 2001. And he himself has confessed to 71 murders, but there's 48 confirmed. Um, Most of the murders occurred between 82 and 84. He became a suspect in 83. He passed a polygraph in 84, which has led a lot of people to believe he's sort of the perfect psychopath. He had to pass a polygraph. 84 was the year that Ted Bundy was approached to give his insight into like the profile and how to catch him. He was approached by Robert Keppel. He was arrested in both 82 and 2001 on prostitution charges. On November 30th, 2001, long-standing DNA evidence linked him to 4 murders, and then he entered a plea bargain to plead guilty to 48 murders, basically to get rid of the death sentence. If he agreed to that, they'd give him life. And a lot of people think he wasn't doing it out of the kindness of his heart. He was doing it to save his own ass, which the end of the movie kind of portrays him that way. Then 2011, the 49th conviction came in, and now he's serving life at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. I actually sent him a letter not too long ago, still waiting on a reply. I don't know if he will reply, but he was married 3 times. He had a son with, I believe it was the first one. Let's see, his son was born in 75. So it was his second one, Marsha Brown. Now, he said he wanted to kill as many prostitutes as possible, as many as he possibly could. He was bullied as a kid. He had 2 out of the 3 McDonald triad symptoms, which was bedwetting and torturing animals. He was sexually abused by his mother. Every time he'd wet the bed, she would very meticulously cleanse him. He saw his father as very meek, timid, so he kind of had a negative view of his father and thoughts of his domineering mother. Gave him very conflicting thoughts of lust and anger and violence towards her. He tortured animals. When he was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy just to see what it felt like. The boy lived. Then he went to Vietnam. He was sort of a sex addict, had a prostitute, caught gonorrhea, hated her for it, came back, found out his first wife had an affair, divorced him. That pushed him further down the line of misogyny. And then he began his reign of terror on prostitutes. Apparently, he had both an insatiable sexual appetite, even demanding sex in public places, but he was also a huge, or he was hugely religiously fanatic, even crying during sermons, just blurting out the Bible phrases or going around reading the Bible to neighbors. which kind of contrasts what he was doing with prostitutes. And yeah, he went into hiding towards the late 80s, and he had a few more murders in the 90s, but then ultimately caught in 2001. And the Green River Killer was almost another name like Zodiac or at the time BTK. And it may not. He has one of the biggest body counts in American history. And just to put it into perspective, that's what 48 people looks like, because this was written before 2011, so it was 48 at the time. That's a lot of people. I mean, for confirmed kills, I mean, that eclipses Gacy, Bundy. It's still very possible he could have killed 71. I mean, if they're adding or finding more convictions like they did in 2011, he very well. There could be more out there. So now on to the film. I mentioned Mary Dora. Opens up with a guy laying on the bank of the river, and I guess to show his mental state, it'll show supposedly real footage of like autopsy, morgue, stuff, and slaughterhouse scenery. If it's not real, if it's faked, then they know how to fake it, both in just quality of the footage and the effects. Then we get authentic voiceover from Gary Ridgway. It is kind of jarring to go back and forth between him and the actor for voiceover, because they both do it. But then we cut to June 16th of 81 in King County, Washington, which is where he was. I'm guessing it's the first victim because it shows the date. It's the only date we get in the film as far as the killings go. Which he brings a woman back to his house, strangles her, his son is there. Which a few times his son was around. He would bring his son in his truck with him, and then he would kind of lead the prostitute away down in the woods, leave the kid in his truck, or he would have a picture of his son on his visor so he would look less harmless. Strangled her, and a lot of his victims, some of them he did bring to his house, but most were in his truck. Now, his first victim was actually a 60-year-old prostitute named Wendy Cofield in July 8th of 82, so not 81. And then she was dumped in the river. It shows that his son Kevin is already 7 or 8, being born in 75. Could be possible. Except his son's real name was Matthew, not Kevin. And then he mentions his imaginary friend Boris, and how he's the guy that taught him how to do all this stuff, and he does it all for Boris. And again, anytime Boris is on screen, it just looks like a Mary and Dora film because Karsten Frank is in it, and the way it's shot. Which also, I mean, the rest of the movie, the acting is still terrible. The way it's shot is still bad. Lamell tries to do some tricks, like having this superimposed shots, like when the prostitute's in the shower, like kind of superimposed of her looking this way, then that way. I don't know what it is, but like this pinpoint in the middle of the screen, so whatever's close to it kind of gets warped. The scene with the prostitute at his house, where he wants her to go to the bathroom, she says she has to shit. He's like, "Do you want to wipe my ass? You can." I'm like, "Please don't do that." I'm like, oh, okay, this is definitely Mary Dora. He's involved in this. It doesn't go that far. It says on July 15th of 82, a body is found. The first body is found. That's true. It shows him working, and two of his co-workers who are like the stereotypical dumb redneck that you would see in a movie, like a guy with long hair and a cap. He's just like, "Oh, well, you saying that? Well, Gary." Now, the short-haired one, they should have got to play Gary Ridgway. Even though he's a terrible actor, he looks more like a young Gary Ridgway. I would have bought that more. He talks about his wife, Irene, which would be his second wife. Says he's been married 3 times, which is true. but this marriage is 14 years. The only time he was married for 14 years was his third wife, and that was because they were married 14 years by the time of his arrest. But her name's Irene, but his three wives was Claudia Barrows, Marcia Brown, and Lorraine Lynch, which was 2 years, 8 years, and then 14. Then it shows a prostitute killed in an RV, which the RV is too new to be an 80s model, which that's one thing I noticed with Uwe Lamel. Cars, the way houses and the insides of houses look, the inside of this RV, clothes, nothing looks period. This looks like a 2005 RV, and it's definitely not 80s. They talk about a woman named Regina Belwith, and they say that she makes 10 in less than a year. So if we're saying that's the 10th victim, it's actually Linda Jane Rule, who was killed September 26th of 82, but she was not found until January 31st of 83. Which I'm guessing this whole thing is made up because he says she was killed less than 48 hours ago. So none of that adds up. And then it shows him sitting by the river and mentions, this is when he mentions that he tortured animals, stabbed a 6-year-old when he was 13, which is true, but he was actually 16 and the boy lived. Shows the police looking into him. It doesn't show him taking the polygraph or anything. That would have been interesting. Shows them being at the bar where he gets prostitutes, sort of checking him out, watching him. He does bring another prostitute to his house, and his wife walks in. But then she's in the film later on, so she didn't leave him, even though his second wife did eventually leave him for infidelity, even though she wasn't faithful either. And then it just says 20 years later. It says March 12th, 2001, 6 biological samples were sent to some science lab. And then it says how each one was linked to him, like semen, pubic hair, and the names of the women in the movie. I couldn't find exactly which sample was linked to what victim. It probably says it in this, but it's been a while since I've read it. I didn't want to flip through it. But it shows that him being arrested at his home, now that they know it's him. But he was arrested November 30th, 2001, in his truck while he was leaving work. It then shows him leading authorities around the river, trying to find bodies. He did do that. He did take them on the expeditions to find unaccounted for bodies. And the voiceover says that he's desperate to stay alive for as long as possible, which is why people think he was wanted for, I think, 4 murders, but he confessed to 48 just to get rid of the death penalty, so people think he was just taking the coward's way out. And then this was really stupid. It ends with a voiceover. Well, it says Gary Ridgway sentenced 48 life sentences. And then there's black screen voiceover saying, "Hi Mom, it's Kevin. I just met a girl and I may have killed her." Which, no, Matthew never killed anyone, at least not to my knowledge. I'm guessing it's just sort of the movie's way of saying, hey, Gary saw some stuff and Kevin saw some stuff, so now the cycle is going to continue. Which there's also a bit towards the end, because when he first talks about Boris, he says he died Thanksgiving of 79, which I thought, okay, they're just making him really delusional. But then at the end, there's this revelation where when he goes to the Green River for the last time, kind of bathes himself in it, and we get a flashback to him killing a prostitute in 79, which he didn't do. This guy named Boris walking in on him, and then Gary killing him because he saw it. And so then that the memory of Boris kind of became this manifestation. Uh, Something about how that's the only murder he felt bad about, or something. Completely fabricated. Everything about Boris is fabricated. But yeah, that's Uwe Lammel's Green River Killer. Now, saying it's the of the three Uwe Lamel films I've reviewed so far, saying that is the best and the most historically accurate really isn't saying that much. It's really not at all. But I definitely appreciated this one more than the other two. This one was definitely easier to sit through. But it's still awful. It's still a bad film. It's still an Uwe Lamel film. Uh, there was a lot of really easy stuff they could have done, which also the detectives that look into Ridgway, and I noticed this with other Lamel films, they must not have a costume department or care about casting because they don't look like detectives at all. But they couldn't do a scene where he, passes the polygraph. Uh, this one was definitely more lazy with dates and trying to connect crimes to real life ones. Even Night Stalker had a date for almost every single one. Uh, the actor George Kiselev, I mean, he was definitely better than that Adolf Cortez that played Night Stalker, or the younger version of Raider and BTK Killer, but I almost would have rather his short-haired co-worker play young Gary. If they wanted to use this Kiselev guy 20 years later, because he still plays himself, he just wears an old man hat, okay, like the Whitey Bulger did when he got caught. But yeah, it's definitely the better of the three and the most accurate, but it still has all the same issues that every Uwe Lamel film has, and not just that it's shot on video, but trying to use these artsy techniques and trying to be cool. The way I get he's trying to uh, inject the real life, I'm guessing, shots of autopsies and morgue footage and slaughterhouse footage, I guess, to show his psyche. Which at first I thought the autopsy stuff might have been, hey, we're looking at his victims, even if it's not really Gary Ridgway victims. Just the idea of, oh, this is them after they were found. Which, either way, whatever. And yeah, normally, again, even with a good movie, if I see footage or hear audio of the real killer, it kind of makes me want to just watch a documentary. But with this, where it was so bad, I was almost grateful. I was kind of like, oh, thank God. Gary Ridgway, thank you. Which I know isn't good to say, but the movie is awful still. But yeah, this one was better, and it was closer to the real thing than the other two. Uh, I know there is a TV movie. I think it's called Searching for the Green River Killer or In Search of the Green River Killer. I heard that was loosely based, but I imagine it's way better than this. I don't feel like I need a Green River Killer palate cleanser as much as I did with Night Stalker and BTK, but it it's better than I expected. I mean, those two movies really laid my expectations down as low as possible, and while it's still in the same tier, it was still better. Uh, Forgive me for saying Gary Ridgway deserves better, but I mean, eh, as far as true crime media goes, his story deserves better. The victims deserve better, I guess I should say. But not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's still fucking terrible. And also, another issue that I keep having with this films is the sound design. Whether it's dialogue or voiceover, it's pretty much the same volume as either the music or sound effects of what's going on. Like if it's a car running or someone doing something. It's very hard to hear, especially since the voiceover in all of his films is all pretty much like a whispering. It's very hard to hear what's going on. But yeah, I actually was surprised by how accurate it was and how not as shitty it was than the other two. I mean, it's still not good by any means, but I was surprised. So the only other thing Green River related I have to review would be the Riverman. I do want to get Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer. I'm thinking that might be a better version of this, but at some point I'll check this out. Maybe I'll see if the TV movie is on YouTube, and then I'll check that out. But in any case, I do have plenty more serial killer films to get to. Unfortunately, that's the only one I have for Gary Ridgway. But stay tuned for more, and thank you for watching.